Our next speaker is a MD, Dr. Daniel Nagase. Has been a doctor for over 15 years. He graduated from Dalhousie Medical School in 2004. He has been an emergency doctor for 10 years and has been working in rural, underserved communities throughout Alberta since 2015. He has a story he would like to share with you about what happened after he gave COVID patients Ivermectin in a small hospital west of Red Deer, Alberta. I am honored to have Daniel come and speak, and with all other speakers, he'll have to stay close to the microphone to avoid the echoing that you might hear from time to time. Daniel, thank you.
It's very good to see all of you out here. Thank you very much, Joseph. And I'm so happy to see every single one of you here remembering the Nuremberg Trials. And that's the key here, remembering. Not just the nurses and the doctors who are helping by speaking the truth, people like Dr. Charles Hoff in Lytton, but also to remember the doctors in hospital administration, the doctors at the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the doctors you see on TV that are standing in the way of life-saving medication. Let me tell you what happened in Rimbey, Alberta. It's a small town about 2 hours west of Red Deer. It shocked me. I started on Saturday morning in the ER, and when it came time to round on the ward patients, the charge nurse informed me that 3 of the patients on the COVID wing had deteriorated overnight. All the patients were on oxygen and extremely short of breath. And the only medications these patients were on were steroids. A medication that will decrease inflammation, but increase the chance of a bacterial infection because it suppresses the immune system. That's right. These COVID patients were on medication, and the only medication they were on was an immune suppressant. One woman who spoke to me said she felt like we just put her in a corner and were waiting for her to die. We weren't doing anything for her. I told her that I can't speak for the usual doctors at the hospital, but it's the weekend and I'm on a shift, and I'll do everything I can to help. I offered Ivermectin. She wanted to try it because she heard nothing but good things about Ivermectin. All 3 of my COVID patients who had deteriorated from the night before wanted Ivermectin. The small hospital in Rimbey did not have any, so we had to ask Red Deer Hospital's central pharmacy to send us some Ivermectin. They refused. Red Deer's central pharmacist said Ivermectin was useless for COVID. He even had the pharmacy director for all of Alberta contact me to tell me that Ivermectin did not work. The pharmacy director for Alberta Health Services is Dr. Gerald Lazarenko. Remember that name. He is both a pharmacist and a doctor and a professor at the University of Calgary. He insisted to me that Ivermectin had no place in the treatment of COVID. Being rejected from Red Deer Central Pharmacy, we checked the local pharmacies, And God bless that charge nurse. Because although both pharmacies in town did not have ivermectin, one pharmacist, who had been a pharmacist in Rimbey for 25 years, said he would do everything he could to find me some, even if it took all day. We didn't have all day. My patients were sick. So I started them on the next best thing, hydroxychloroquine, which the hospital did have. I also started vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc. And because my patients were coughing and short of breath, I gave them inhalers, salbutamol and Flovent, the same inhalers that have been used for asthma for over 50 years. And finally, I also gave them azithromycin. Surprisingly, by the late afternoon, the town pharmacist, the one who would do anything to find ivermectin, finally found some ivermectin. He couldn't get it from his usual chemical supply because it was a Saturday. He had to get it from an agricultural supply. He went to the co-op store, he checked to make sure that it was the exact same ivermectin that a pharmacist would give to a person. He brought it back to his pharmacy and he checked it again. It was the exact same ivermectin he would take himself or he would give to his own mother. Then he called me with the good news. I handed ivermectin to each of my 3 patients with their exact dose according to their weight. And you'll never guess what happened next. Within hours of my patients getting ivermectin, I got a call from the Central Zone Medical Director in Alberta, Dr. Jennifer Bestard. She called me to tell me I was forbidden from giving ivermectin to patients. I told her, she's never met my patients. She's never examined them. She is not their doctor. She has no right to be changing the care of my patients. She has no right to intervene in the care of patients without their permission. She repeated, ivermectin was forbidden from the hospital. Even if patients had their own ivermectin, which I would have happily given over to a relative so the relative could hand it over to the patient so the patient could take it herself. Patients are not allowed to have ivermectin even if it's their own. She said it was a violation of Alberta Health Services policy to give ivermectin for COVID. But that wasn't good enough. The next day, she called the hospital and gave me 15 minutes notice that I would be relieved of my medical duties. I told her this was completely unreasonable. I had an emergency department full of patients who can't be sorted out in 15 minutes. But nevertheless, an hour later, another doctor showed up to replace me. They didn't even want me to check up on the patients I gave ivermectin to. Not even 24 hours after getting ivermectin, 2 out of my 3 patients were almost completely better. They were out of bed, walking around, and all the crackles I heard in their lungs were gone. All it took was about 18 hours and 1 dose of ivermectin. The 3rd patient was 95 years old. She stayed the same. She didn't get any worse like she did from the night before. Later on, I found out that no sooner had I left the hospital the next doctor who came to replace me stopped the antibiotics, stopped all the vitamins, and she even stopped my patient's inhalers. Within hours of me leaving the hospital, this doctor took away my patient's inhalers that helped them breathe. Thankfully, both of those 70-year-old patients that had immediate recoveries after ivermectin, they left the hospital within the week. I'd like to speak briefly to the healthcare professionals in the crowd and who might be listening. No doctor would take away antibiotics and inhalers for any viral pneumonia, never mind COVID. No doctor would do that for any patient with pneumonia, unless they were. Well, I'll let you think about that. We are remembering Nuremberg after all. And for healthcare professionals, I want us all to think very deeply about that. But it gets worse. In my brief day and a half in the small town of Rimbey, I saw 2 patients who had been recently discharged from Red Deer Hospital after being on the COVID ward. They were sent home with nothing, not even an inhaler. These patients were so desperate they ended up in a small town ER wanting help. And this is just days after being sent home from a tertiary care regional hospital with nothing. There is something malicious going on. I hope you can all see the bigger picture. This is more than me having all my assignments canceled in all the small communities I was scheduled to work. This is more than me being canceled for the rest of the year. This is more than the medical director, Dr. Francois Bélanger of Alberta Health Services, banning me from hospital practice throughout Alberta. Just a week after giving ivermectin, and then filing a complaint against the Alberta pharmacy director, a complaint that I sent to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta about the pharmacy director for an entire province denying 11 pages of studies showing 0% mortality for patients given ivermectin. In study after study after study, 0% mortality, 0% mortality, 0% mortality with ivermectin. And guess what? This is all contained inside Alberta Health Services' own report on ivermectin published in February. Just a week after I filed a complaint about Dr. Gerald Lazarenko withholding life-saving medications from an entire province, the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons forbade doctors and pharmacists from giving patients ivermectin. We must remember. We are here to remember. Not just the people who died from medical experimentation. We are here to remember the people today. We are here to remember every single doctor, lawyer, medical ethicist that sits on the board of the BC College who is investigating Dr. Charles Hoff for speaking the truth. We are here to remember every doctor who stopped patients from having a life-saving medication. And what for? To boost mortality? To create an ICU crisis? To declare a state of emergency across the entire province of Alberta? All to push a vaccine? We must remember. Remember the people of the past and the people of today. History repeats itself. Nuremberg will happen again. We must remember.